Language is the most powerful technology humans ever invented. Not the wheel, not agriculture, not electricity, not the internet. Language. Because every invention you've ever heard of exists because one human was able to place an idea inside another human's mind. But here's the strange part. For most of human history, that ability didn't exist. There was a time when your ancestors looked at the world around them and had no words for it, no stories, no names, no way to explain an idea, no way to describe a memory, no way to tell someone what happened yesterday, which raises one of the most fascinating questions in human history. How did humans learn to speak? How did a species that once lived in silence become a species capable of building civilizations? The answer is one of the strangest stories science has ever uncovered, and it begins with a mystery. Because language leaves no fossils. You can dig up ancient bones. You can find stone tools. You can discover cave paintings that are tens of thousands of years old. But you cannot find a word. You cannot excavate a conversation. Every sentence your ancestors ever spoke disappeared the moment it was spoken, which means scientists studying the origin of language are working with almost no direct evidence. Instead, they have to reconstruct the story using clues, ancient skulls, genetics, archaeology, animal behavior, and surprisingly, those clues reveal quite a lot. But before we talk about language, we need to talk about communication, because they aren't the same thing. Animals communicate all the time. Bees perform dances that tell other bees where to find flowers. Dolphins have signature whistles that function almost like names. Chimpanzees use different calls for different dangers. That's impressive, but it isn't language. The difference comes down to one thing: symbols. A chimpanzee alarm call is directly connected to a situation. A predator appears. The chimp reacts. The sound is tied to the emotion. Human language is different. The word water isn't wet. The word fire isn't hot. The word danger doesn't sound dangerous. They're just sounds. Sounds that millions of people collectively agree represent ideas. Every word you've ever spoken is a symbol, and that ability to use symbols changed everything. At some point, humans stopped making sounds that simply expressed feelings. They started making sounds that represented ideas, and once that happened, history changed forever. But before humans could speak, something else had to happen. Their bodies had to change. Most mammals have a voice box positioned high in the throat. It's a practical design. They can breathe and swallow at the same time. The risk of choking is extremely low. Humans are different. Our voice box sits much lower. That creates a larger chamber inside the throat that allows us to produce a huge variety of sounds. Without it, speech would be impossible. But there was a cost. Humans are among the few mammals that regularly choke on food. Every year, people die because food enters the wrong passage, which means evolution made a remarkable trade. The ability to speak was so valuable that it accepted a design that occasionally kills us. And that's not the strangest part. Scientists discovered that Neanderthals may have had the same physical equipment for speech. In 1989, researchers found a tiny bone in a Neanderthal skeleton known as the hyoid bone. When they examined it, they found something surprising. It looked almost identical to a modern human hyoid, which suggested that Neanderthals may have been capable of producing complex speech sounds. Then, genetics made the mystery even bigger. Scientists discovered a gene linked to speech and language abilities. When they analyzed Neanderthal DNA, they found that Neanderthals shared the same crucial version of that gene. The hardware was already there, possibly hundreds of thousands of years ago, but having the ability to make sounds isn't enough. Parrots can make speech sounds. That doesn't mean they're having conversations. Language requires something deeper, the ability to understand another mind. Think about what happens every time you speak. You aren't simply making noise. You're taking an idea that exists only inside your head and placing it inside somebody else's. That's extraordinary. And it requires a very special kind of intelligence, the ability to understand that other people have thoughts, beliefs, memories, and intentions different from your own. Many scientists believe this social intelligence was one of the key ingredients that made language possible, and there may have been another reason language evolved. Human groups were getting larger. As our ancestors formed bigger communities, they faced a new problem: relationships. Who can you trust? Who shares food? Who helps others? Who causes problems? Keeping track of dozens or even hundreds of people requires an enormous amount of information. Some researchers believe language evolved as the solution, and surprisingly, they think the first conversations may have been about something very familiar. Gossip, not philosophy, not science, not poetry. Gossip. Who did what? Who can be trusted? Who broke the rules? It sounds trivial, but in a cooperative species, social information is survival information. And even today, a huge percentage of human conversation revolves around exactly those topics. We've built skyscrapers and spacecraft, but deep down, we're still interested in what everyone else is doing. Language made that possible. And once language existed, something extraordinary happened. Knowledge stopped dying with the people who possessed it. Before language, each generation had to learn almost everything through direct experience. After language, knowledge could be shared. A parent could teach a child. An elder could teach an entire group. One generation could build on the discoveries of the last. This is known as cumulative culture, and it may be the single most important reason humans became the dominant species on Earth. Think about everything you know. Most of it came from other people. You didn't discover mathematics. You didn't invent farming. You didn't create electricity. You inherited knowledge from countless generations before you. Language made that inheritance possible. And then, around 70,000 years ago, something remarkable appeared in the archaeological record. Art, jewelry, complex tools, long-distance trade, symbols everywhere. It's as if human imagination suddenly exploded. Many researchers believe this explosion is the visible fingerprint of fully developed language, because you cannot pass down stories without language. You cannot teach complex skills without language. You cannot build a culture without language. Language became the invisible foundation beneath everything else. And yet, despite everything we've learned, one mystery remains. What was the first word? The truth is, we have no idea. We don't know who spoke it. We don't know where it happened. We don't know what it meant, and we probably never will. But somewhere in prehistoric Africa, one human made a sound that represented an idea, not a reflex, not a warning cry, a symbol, and another human understood. In that moment, something happened that had never happened before. One mind reached deliberately into another. Every story you've ever heard, every lesson you've ever learned, every joke, every book, every scientific discovery, every civilization, every idea that has ever traveled from one human being to another, all of it traces back to that moment. Language didn't just change human history, language created it.